project, a little bit of history, and then this wonderful gentleman here are going to give more details. So this is the third part to a very long project. There were 2 parts previously, and both of them had NSF grants, received NSF grants. So this is the third part of the project with an NSF grant funding. The first 2 parts, they happened over a period of 10 years, maybe 15 years ago or something like that. And the idea was to get disciplines who require their students to take math classes and talk about why they want their students to take these math classes, or what skills, what knowledge they want their students to get out of that math class, and to help them later in their major. So this was sponsored by the Mathematical Association of America, which is one of the 2 largest mathematical associations in the States. The first part, they brought in these partner disciplines, faculty from partner disciplines. They had tens of workshops. And the partner disciplines just sat down together and talked about what they would like to see in the math classes that their students take. And around them sat the math faculty and just listened. They didn't talk much, not that we talk much. We just use symbols and our own phone and sit in our own offices. So that was a great opportunity from which a document came out called Voices of the Partner Disciplines. Every discipline, and virtually every discipline, was brought in to talk about what they would like to see in math classes. So a document came out from every discipline, from every workshop, explaining that, what they want the students to learn, the content of the course, and the skills that they want. The second part, where they put this together, put other recommendations in a second document called Crafty Document, curriculum reform something. There are too many acronyms in these projects. And so then this third part, we're implementing the recommendations in these documents. So this is a 5-year grant we received last September, so the first year is already over. We have 4 more years where we're implementing these recommendations. We're working with 10 other institutions. So just this is what we're going to talk about, give you project information and talk about personnel briefly, give you a project update, and then finally, how can this project help you here at least. So the name of the project is Summit P, if you've noticed at the top. That's an acronym for Synergistic Undergraduate Mathematics by Multi-Institutional Interdisciplinary Teaching Partnerships. And so probably a year later, I'm not going to remember 2 days later, I'm not going to remember all this titles, just like for Crafty. It's a collaborative research project of a national consortium that includes 10 other institutions. So we're working with other 10 institutions, not just here at Lee, in implementing these recommendations through the idea or the concept of a faculty learning community. And as I said, it's a 5-year project. So before I go over the goals, I'll tell you what a faculty learning community is. So it's basically a group of interdisciplinary faculty getting together and talking with each other, having a lot of meetings and discussions on exactly what the partner discipline wants out of the math discipline and the specific math courses. So on Lee's level, this is us. We are the faculty learning community in that project. With the 10 other institutions, each of the other 10 institutions has their own faculty learning community. So, but we are collaborating with them, so there's interaction or collaboration between the different faculty learning communities, And then, so that's nationwide, and then we want to disseminate all this information through the large mathematics conferences and other conferences to help the other communities, the rest of the mathematical community with the project. So there are very specific goals to the project. It says the research project, so we have research questions. So the goals are to foster a network of faculty and programs to promote institutional transformation, implement recommendations from the Mathematical Association of America Curriculum Foundations Project. That's the publication that I mentioned earlier. Monitor the implementations and their impact on faculty and students. Change undergraduate math curriculum to support improved STEM learning. The research questions that we're trying to answer through this period, the beliefs of the consortium faculty regarding interdisciplinary collaborations, creation of and support for faculty learning communities, the extent to which institutions are implementing and supporting interdisciplinary collaborations, and the effect of the faculty learning communities on courses and students' learning and attitudes. So we're going to attempt to answer all these questions during the 5-year or the 4-year meeting. So basically, as you can tell from here, there are 2 research subjects. There is us, the local faculty learning community, and the faculty learning communities in the consortium. So they are actually sending us assessments that we need to fill out to be able to answer these questions. And also the students and what we're doing in the courses, in our courses, and how it's going to affect the students in assessment for that. Personnel here, just local, it's me representing the math division. Jason Robinson is representing the partner discipline from the College of Education. Brian Poole representing Social Sciences Department, and Joan is representing Joan Hearn representing the Sciences division. So we're working on 3 math classes. With the College of Education, we're working with Math 109, which is Concepts of Mathematics. And that's a course that's taken by all education majors. They have to have that course. With Brian, we're working with Intro to Stats, the Math 161, which is the core class and required by most of the majors. With John, we're working with College Algebra for STEM. And so we have, this past year, we have had a lot of meetings, a lot of activities. And we are going to start, we actually piloted some of the ideas last semester in the spring, but we're going to fully implement the recommendations in the 3 courses starting this year. So each of these partner disciplines is going to talk about their contribution to the project. Just want to give you an update of like what has happened so far after all these meetings and discussions we had. One activity we had in May, I believe, we had a fishbowl activity where we replicated what happened 10 years ago. We brought in the faculty from different disciplines beyond these faculty here. And we had them sit down, and with them sat a math faculty that taught the course that's needed by that discipline. And we had the partner discipline faculty just speak. Let's hear from you what you want in this course. And the math faculty just listened and took notes and what they need to do in their classes. Wonderful ideas came out of that activity. One in particular, we did not include the health science. We didn't think of health science, but there was a health science faculty in that activity. And she actually, what she talked about, gave us ideas of how we can actually incorporate some of the health science ideas into our college algebra class. So it was really, really wonderful. So these meetings and discussions are really productive. They're not just meetings. So results, we're learning about each other's discipline, connecting dots between departments and schools, collaborating with other institutions and getting ideas of what they're doing on their campus. So as part of the collaboration with the 10 other institutions, we're getting ideas of how they're running their courses. We just had a virtual meeting one of the institutions and learned, for example, the college algebra, how they're not teaching it like a 3 credit hour course, they're just doing 2 lectures and a lab, and they have data about whether that lab is actually helpful or not. So ideas like that we can try on our campus and see if they work for our students. Another thing I remember very significant, John and I mean, we're in the same department, but as a result of the discussions we have, we realized they're using words that we're not using. Their vocabulary that they're using is different from ours. So we figured, okay, well, we need to have some similar vocabulary. If I talk in my math class the same way the science people talk, or have them talk as we talk, then we can get the students to understand better. Like there's consistency and there's continuity in the process, learning process. So that's an overview of the project. I think each of these partner disciplines is going to come up and just talk about their recommendations.
One of the greatest things that I think has surfaced so far from this grant for me has been faculty learning communities. When I think about the public school, when I was at the public school, we formed teams of different subject areas. That was one of the biggest shocks to me when I came to the university level, was each college was kind of an island in itself, and there was not a lot of communication between the departments. What do you think some of the strengths of a faculty learning community would be? What do you think some of the strengths would be? Pam, thank you for volunteering. I taught middle school, I'm sorry.
I know, and I was hiding behind the person in front of me, but you found me. Just learning from each other, their disciplines, and, and you do a lot of things common, and then you do a lot of things different.
Shane?
When I think about too, consistency, you guys are all seeing the same students. I mean, you're teaching math education courses that Jason's also going to have interaction with, that John's going to have interaction with, Brian's going to have interaction with, so you get some commonality there of they're seeing some of the same things across the board. So,
Dr. Dirksen?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. We live in silos, but they don't. They cross.
right.
They go across all of this, and if we, one of the things we talked about a lot in developing the QEP, which is integrated learning, was how do we talk about the same thing in the same way so that the kid knows, well, we're picking up what you just did in that last class.
Right.
Because if we think in silos and we don't make those connections, even though they're going across it horizontally, it's hard for them to make abstract connections.
Absolutely, and the amazing thing for us in the College of Ed through this whole grant project was we had certain needs out of our students that could only be met by communicating with the math department, but that communication wasn't there. Yeah, and all the way across the board. And as I think about how great this would be all the way university-wide as departments begin to communicate back and forth, I mean, it can only help our students. One of the, out of the crafty document that came forth, there were several items that we in the College of Ed looked at, and I'm going to tell you the 2 that we chose specifically. We chose, number 2 said, tools for teaching and learning such as calculators, computers, and physical objects, including manipulatives commonly found in schools, should be available for problem solving and math courses taken by prospective teachers. We felt it was really important for our future teachers to know how to use manipulatives. Why? Because they're going to be going into the schools dealing with students from many different levels, and they have to know how to use the manipulatives. But we weren't really doing that. We weren't using them in the math classes. The third one was mathematics courses for future teachers should provide opportunities for students to learn mathematics using a variety of instructional methods, including many we would like them to use in their teaching. And why do we want them to use manipulatives? Well, when I came to Lee, one of the things that I already knew is in our math classes at the middle school and elementary levels, our teachers had to use manipulatives every single day. But we weren't necessarily teaching our students how to use them in the classroom. And can you imagine that culture shock when you walk into the classroom and all of a sudden they tell you you have to use manipulatives? So the reason that we believe that we need to have our students use manipulatives is the National Council of Teacher Mathematics calls for manipulatives to be used in teaching a wide variety of topics in mathematics. The second reason is states are requiring it. Our teachers don't have the option of opting out on manipulative use. And I just named a couple: California, North Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, among others across the nation, have also mandated the use of manipulatives. We know that research in learning theory, experiential education supports the use of manipulatives. And then when we look at Montessori, Piaget, Bruner, each of these emphasize the importance of authentic learning experiences and the use of concrete tools as an important stage in development of understanding. And Caroline talked about that fishbowl experience. I had no clue what they were even talking about when they said we were going to do a fishbowl. But it was one of the most beneficial things I've ever seen, because I was sitting in a group with Randall Ferguson and Dr. Murray, and Sheila was in our group, and we began to discuss what exactly can we do to see that crossover between the math department and our education department. What is it that we as an education department need for our students? And we talked about the concepts of Math 109 class. And as we began to hear Randall, these are conversations that had never taken place. And as we began to hear Randall talk, we realized that our students are coming in at so many different levels, entering this concepts of math class. A very few of our students are ready to roll, and they know these, but he's having to actually backtrack and go back and teach some basic math concepts, adding and subtracting fractions with many of our students. And when I talked to Dr. Browning about this, and I said, with Piaget and Bruner, with what they believe, even Montessori, we believe that students in their own elementary classes have missed all of this because manipulatives weren't always used. And we can't help them in the future if we're not using them. So the fishbowl experience was really positive for us. The second piece of that crafty document said math courses should provide opportunities for students to learn using a variety of instructional methods. And again, we were talking about that Math 109 class. And what came out of that fishbowl experience is we realized Randall needed manipulatives. He wanted them. Listen, he said, if you guys will help me with these, I will use them in class. We'll go back and we'll not only teach the students how to get these concepts, but we'll teach them how to use them in the classroom. That's exactly what we needed. But that conversation had never taken place. And then the classroom placement tests that we talk about in the methods experience, students are being expected from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade to use math manipulatives in the classroom. Their teachers are holding them accountable for it. In our department, we actually have a math manipulatives test that we give to our method students. And the students literally are panicked to think, how do I add and subtract fractions using these manipulatives? Cuisinart rods, something as simple as Cuisinart rods. When we sit them in front of us and say, okay, here's your math problem, now you have to show us how you're going to teach the first graders with these. They are panicked. I mean, you will literally see continents form all the way up their neck because they are literally panicked. We've had kids in tears. They don't know how to use manipulatives. So that is a great thing that's happened through this grant, at least for the College of Ed, and I'm hoping the math department, is this conversation has started taking place of what can we do to help our students. So
it's like I'm it. So I'm sort of the liaison in this project for the sciences, that's chemistry and biology and health science. So this curriculum foundations recommendation, there's a lot of sort of, well, of course, that's what we want. It was sort of preaching to the choir. Yeah, we want our students to be able to do all of that. I didn't really pick out a lot of the details here, but I picked out one sentence here from that, which is students need to understand the meaning and use of variables, parameters, functions, and relations. And I underline that word understand, because there's a lot of sort of implications of that. If they really understand what they're doing, then they can do the nuts and bolts of algebra, I hope. So, of course we want them to be able to solve for x, but we also want them to understand how to set up an equation. What does x mean in this context? So in chemistry we have a lot of concrete problems that we work through where we assign, letters to things, and they need to know that those letters have a meaning, and then how to work the algebra around that. So we have a lot of sort of specific things that that we sort of outlined, if they do understand, then they should be able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to go through those, but I did want to talk a little bit about sort of, the approach that we're taking. How are we going to improve student learning? Now, I've always sort of felt like a black sheep in this project because I actually see the faculty learning communities as a means to an end, but I understand that the higher ups are actually studying us, and so we're sort of the research subjects here. I'm not that interested in the faculty learning communities as an end of itself. I'm interested in this dialogue and how does it help our students. And I have two specific examples that I want to mention from this last year that came out of this. One is prerequisite knowledge. Now, for algebra, we require all of our students in general chemistry to have algebra, and so talking with Carolyn about the college algebra class and the content that they go through, I asked, so when do you cover logarithms? And she said, well, we don't cover that in algebra. Okay. Well, that's why our students really struggle with logarithms when we get, because we use logs in general chemistry. And so knowing that our students may not have that prerequisite knowledge is really important for us because we need to take a step back when we get to that content in chemistry so that we can go through it a little more thoroughly so that they're not lost on the chemistry. Because I just have to say, well, didn't y'all learn this? And if I knew that they did, I could, maybe be a little more assertive and say, no, I know you learned this. You may have forgotten. But, just having a better awareness of what students have already seen so that I'm prepared to fill in the gaps and to make the proper transitions. The other thing, which Carolyn already mentioned, which is language. And one of the language things that I really stood out to me was, when I was looking through the algebra syllabus and we were talking, was, they first start with one variable equations. And I was like, how can you only have one variable? You have to have at least two. And so, and it turns out that she was using variable in the context that we in chemistry use the word unknown, because variables when we talk about chemistry are things that we can change. So I can change the temperature. That's a variable. I can't change a constant. Now, a constant may be the unknown, but it's not a variable. So, there's some things like that knowing the language that she's using, I can help bridge the gap between the math course and the chemistry course. And so those are just two specific things just this past year that really I've seen benefits from our faculty learning community. So the result of that, we want to make some interventions in the classroom, right? So of course I'm going to make some interventions, in my chemistry class to make sure that I'm, bridging the gap between algebra and chemistry. But these are things that we're actually planning on doing this next year in the algebra class. Now, our goal is to improve student learning, and or at least my goal is. And that's a hard question to answer. Are students actually learning better? And especially when you talk about carrying knowledge from, an algebra class to a chemistry class, or a rhetoric and research class to another, subject class where they're writing. How do we know that, students are learning better? And I don't have a good answer for you. I really, Matthew Melton in our College of Arts and Sciences meeting, he mentioned that, he wants to see a little more emphasis on that aspect of student learning. And, at this point, we're not ready to really assess that. So what can we assess in the short term? And, our strategy this year is to assess motivation. And that is, I've developed 3 activities that show the application of algebra in chemistry, algebra in biology, algebra in healthcare. And so the first question is, what sort of flavor of application really helps motivate our students? And then we can design a little more activities around that, and hopefully some continuity of, hey, all these motivational activities might pile up to, better outcome. But I don't know how we're going to measure that. So if you have any ideas about how to really assess student learning, I'd be all ears. But that's all I got.
I'm with John on this one. I think the more interesting thing about the grant is what it's doing for the students. Because for me, I teach the psychology, research methods, and statistics course. And so what I get the opportunity to do in their supposed to be sophomore year is to teach them research methods and then teach them how statistics can complement them and inform them and help them understand some answers to research questions that they have. But they have to have taken Intro to Stats before they get to my class. It's one of the prerequisites. But when they get to my class, one of the problems that we frequently encounter is we start at the very basic part of Intro to Stats. And I'll sort of test them on what they know, and what they would have covered in Math 161 has sort of been forgotten since they had taken it. And that could have been one semester, 1 year, or 3 years ago, depending on how long they try to avoid my required class in the psychology program. So it's to no fault of the math faculty at all. They may be doing a phenomenal job at whatever it is that they do, and that's part of the point of this grant, but it's also that the students might have just not practiced a lot of the math stuff by the time they get to my class, and that could be in the end of their senior years. And so part of the point of my portion of this grant was to figure out a way to help students who take this Math 161 class and to better recall and translate the information from that class into what we're doing in psychology. So how can I take very, very basic and sometimes sort of stale, in my opinion, ideas in math, and how do you get that into psychology, and how do they translate with one another? And so in some of those older documents that Caroline was talking about earlier, these older grant documents, we had a list in psychology and in social sciences of skills that these students needed to have when they came to our class. I talked to my department about the skills we thought were essential if a student were going to go on and be a sociologist or a psychologist or a researcher, an anthropologist, some anthropologists. And this was kind of the list that we had narrowed down that we think is most important for our students to have when they graduate from our programs. Really the skills that we want them to have when they're in or getting out of Math 161. And so what I'm doing, honestly, is I'm targeting just a few of these skills in the coming year. And I'm trying to reinforce some of those things using very much social science specific language. So I've created some interventions, and a more candid term would be homework assignments, extra homework assignments, but using social science language that math faculty may or may not use. I've had several meetings with math faculty, and we've talked about that. Math faculty are not necessarily equipped to talk about social science examples. And so maybe students, when they think about the mean, the median, the mode at its most basic form, maybe I talk about it in a very different way than what they talk about it in Math 161. But if I equip the math faculty with examples or homework assignments that couch these kinds of statistics in our terms, when students get to me, they're going to be like, no, I do remember talking about that actually. Oh yeah, I've kind of heard an example like that. Oh, I can see how that plays out in a career that's related to what a researcher or a sociologist might do. And so my job is to talk with the math faculty and find these new assignments or interventions or next year manipulatives that are going to help students make the connection between these basic math classes and the more applied math classes in their majors. And honestly, one of the things that I'm trying to do also is to really curb students' attitudes toward math and stats in these assignments. Because broadly, I think we know that student attitudes toward statistics and math is not necessarily all that positive. And I know I see that in my classes because I've been doing assessment on that for my department ever since I've been here. And the attitudes are not really that positive when they start my class. By the end of it, they've gone significantly higher because I'm trying in my class, in my psych class, to really show them how statistics can be applied to something that they actually love. And again, I know that math faculty do that. I know they target that. But by the time they get to my class, it's some reason or another, the psych students just have kind of put math on the shelf, and it's kind of a different thing. It's not part of my identity. So I'm trying to bridge that gap in the assignments that I'm creating and actively research is this working, as John's talking about? Are we actually changing students' attitudes? Are we actually improving student learning through all of the meetings that we're doing? So that's one way that I'm a part of this grant, and what I'm doing is helping Math 161 in my classes and Dr. Tagiuna's classes sort of bridge these gaps. The other thing that we're doing also in this vein is the creation of something, for lack of a better term, called a student exchange program. Despite the name, which suggests we're going to take students from one country and bring them over to the other, we're not quite doing that, but we're kind of doing that. We're actually taking students from the country of mathematics and students from the country of social science statistics, and we're actually having them, requiring them, and paying them over the course of a year to work together and start talking to one another about the things that they're already doing. So this year, for example, what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 upper-level social science students and 2 upper-level math students, and we're going to have them work together this year. For example, we're going to have them work together in the Math Tutoring Center. And for students who want statistics help, have these tutors work together to teach the students what they, the tutors themselves, may not necessarily know as much of. And these tutors can talk to one another and say, oh, that's a great way to do that. Let's teach the student this, so that they can all be equipped to tutor all of the kinds of students that they're going to encounter in their careers or their other classes. We're going to have them create this year a resource website for all math and statistics students to go to, video tutorials of how to do hard statistics, downloadable study materials if they need help with this or that. And they're going to put this together from the ground up for Lee students. Because we want the social science students to teach the math students and vice versa what they themselves may not already know. And then we're also going to have them collaborate with one another, attending math and statistics symposia, which both of our departments do in the spring semester. So we're going to get a lot of crosstalk between the math and social science students, which right now there really isn't much of. Because when I talk to math students and they talk to me, I have no idea what they're saying. No idea. And when social science students talk to math students, it's like a different language. And we want to try to find a way to speak the same language on the student level. And we have a lot of other ideas as to how we're going to do this in the future. We may have students assist faculty, social science students assist math faculty, and vice versa. So that even we, social science faculty, know what the math students are doing and what the math faculty are doing. We want to increase this interdisciplinary collaboration, which we don't know if there's a lot of right now on campus. And again, we want to actively research, is this actually doing what it's supposed to do? Are these 4 students in the program actually improving their attitudes or their comprehension of the math or statistics that we're actually working on? And that's also my role in this grant, is I'm the assessor. I'm creating these assessments, I'm analyzing these data, I'm going to all the meetings, and I'm actually caring about what comes out of this every year.
And we do all care about the project, because if we didn't, we wouldn't have really done all this work. It's a lot of work. We were all overwhelmed by the amount of work the first year, especially that we didn't get the grant on time. We got it in September when our timeline was like, I think, July or something. And then everybody was cramming to get things started and rolling. It was overwhelming the first year. So if it wasn't for the dedication and the care of each one, we wouldn't have survived the first year. So this is the part where I tell you how this project can help you. So if you are a math faculty teaching one of these courses now, or will be teaching it in the next 4 years, and would like to take part of the project, you would like to pilot these interventions in your classes and see the results, and then we would love for you to partner with us. If you're faculty in these partner disciplines, your voice is important. Your ideas are important, and ideas from any faculty. Just like I said, we had a health science faculty in the fishbowl, and she wasn't sure when she came to the activity if she was going to be helpful. Well, it turned out to be extremely helpful. So just these discussions really give us new ideas that we may not realize how important it is to the project. If you're not a math faculty, if you're not in the partner discipline, but you're interested in doing interdisciplinary collaboration between your department and another department, we have gone through this faculty learning community now for a year. We'll continue doing for more years. We have experience that we can share with you. We can give some guidance and things like that. Thank you for coming, and I hope this session was helpful for you. And anything else?
Any questions anybody has?
Question before we start taking questions?
I'm teaching 161 this fall at least for the first time. Do you have assignments I can use this semester?
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me get in contact with you after this meeting, and we will jump right in.
You know, and I forgot to say that, one of the ways that we're actually partnering with the 109 class is College of Ed is coming up with lessons for Randall to use the manipulative. So it's not like he's having to go out and do all of this extra work. We're actually supplying him with these lessons to help him with those. So yeah, anything we can do to help.
Are the recommendations of particular disciplines filtrating through all the sections of the courses or particular sections of the courses?
So we are trying to have a control group. So it's the faculty who wants to partner with us, willing to partner with us. We would supplement them with interventions. And if they're teaching multiple sections of the same course, then we ask them to not implement the interventions in one section, and then we can have a control group.
Yeah.
This is, I think all of the faculty that are participating now, they're teaching more than one section of the course.
It's interesting. I think it's a great project. A potential downfall might be if the math classes become siloed such that while the faculty are interdisciplinary, the classes cease to be interdisciplinary, right? So it's now the math class for psych majors as opposed to the math class that includes lots of majors.
Right, so that's another idea we have. We're not implementing that yet.
Yeah.
Is it better that, especially for intro to stats, to designate, X number of sections for psychology majors, X number of sections for business majors, and just use interventions that will be effective for these specific majors. We're not doing that right now. We don't know how feasible, can be done, but it's.
We have talked about.
But when, like for the concepts of math, it's very clear, all students there are education majors, that's it.
That one was easy.
Actually, so actually we first thought of doing college algebra for education, not concepts of math. But then realized, and after talking with the faculty that teaches that course, that actually her students are not education majors. They're majors, students from other majors. I was like, this is not gonna help. We're gonna try to implement the recommendations for education majors, and these are not education students. So that's when we did the mapping of the degrees of the College of Education and the requirements for these degrees, we realized the concepts of math is the course that we want, because it will target the right students. So we started with that, and then, part of the or maybe some outcomes of this project is not just the use of interventions in the course. Well, maybe do we need a college algebra for education majors? Or do we need to change the syllabus for college algebra for STEM majors? Maybe the way it is, it's not working. And for the purpose to help these students, we need to do so changes to the syllabus or to the course.
The great thing, I think, also is that we have had nobody pushing back. Everybody has been fully receptive, very cooperative with this grant, and it could have been tough otherwise. Dr. Durston, did you have a question? Sorry.
Actually, I have two. The first one is, how long do you think, to take this out of science and math, but how long do you need to sit together and talk to start getting someplace? I would like to set up conversations from people across disciplines with some sort of goal in mind.
Sure.
So, for example, what do students need to learn in English 110?
Yeah.
What do you think they know when they get out of it, since you use that as an example? Yeah. So if English faculty could sit with people, and how long would it take to have a conversation that would be meaningful? Your project is 5 years, that's kind of staggering. Could we do this over lunch?
You guys jump in. I actually think that the very first time we met between departments or colleges, it was very beneficial. That fishbowl like I said, the fishbowl project was unbelievable to me. What came out of that, and out of that initial, there were so many other meetings that developed with different people. There were lunch meetings with chairs, and it was amazing what happened. And I think one time, I think it doesn't take 5 years to create this discussion of, wow, I didn't even realize we used variable differently.
Yeah,
You know,
well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and-
if you're talking about the same thing, at least you
Absolutely.
can use the same terms.
You know, so those, I think would be very beneficial.
I think, adding on to that, I will disagree. I think our first meeting, at least the four of us, was chaos. And I think we had no idea what we were doing, and it actually took a couple more weeks of like really figuring out our goals. Because I think that's the real difficult thing at the beginning of the grant was really narrowing down for 5 years, how are we going to narrow all of these big goals down in all of these classes. And once we got that, I think then it became much more smooth and streamlined. And like you said, the meetings with the chairs and the faculty were so much more productive. First few weeks though were a little harder because of all of the.
Yeah, and I think, and I wasn't talking necessarily because it was rough.
Yeah.
Because we literally were clueless about what was being expected of us.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. Once we figured this grant out and what this really could become, talking with other faculties where it really came alive. But that first, and I was specifically talking about that fishbowl, and wow.
That was great.
That was amazing what happened. Did you have another question?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
For me, I think real progress started for me probably after we sat down for lunch and talked about what are we actually trying to do? What are we going to assess? Because I couldn't, I couldn't, point my gun if I didn't know what I was aiming at, And so after we talked about some reasonable goals, it really gave me, the framework with which to move forward. So, having some, I think,
Direction, maybe?
yeah, some specific goals, but to get to that point was a little bit of trial and error. But once we carved out the goals, like if we're talking about wanting to inform another course like rhetoric and research, well, the first step for me is to learn what's taught there. Maybe sit in on a class. I mean, I sat in on the algebra class, so I educated myself a little bit, along this process. So I think a lunch meeting would probably go a long way and just getting something started.
That initial, and I think at the start of it, I kind of looked at it. Who am I to tell Randall how to teach his class? And it took Caroline many conversations with me to get past that of, listen, you're not telling you it's this discussion, and I will say this publicly, kudos to Caroline, because the work that she has put into this thing is unbelievable. I mean, she is really the one that had to break this thing down for all of us, because that first meeting, guys, it was rough. I didn't know what was going to happen. But yeah, kudos to you.
Thank you. So it is a huge project. So I want to point out that it's really huge. It's not just on us. It was even on the main PI, the one that's actually overlooking all the 10 institutions in the main project management team. We had a couple meetings last year with all the PIs with the project management team, and they themselves figured, this was so huge, and we have to, narrow it down. And they were asking us questions so they can be able to figure out which roads they want to hold. So it was natural that all of us, not just here at Lee, would, we're like, okay, where do I start? This document is like that huge. Where do we start with this? I would think, Carolyn, that being very clear on what needs to be done would make those meetings very effective. So if there is a set of goals before the meeting, if visiting each other's classes helped a lot. Maybe have that done before a meeting, and then 1 or 2 meetings. But they said that will help. The 5 years is really to answer all these research questions and to see how the implementations are going to implement those interventions throughout a few semesters, to see the results. So, you have another question?
And my other question, probably not of general interest, but, this whole idea of knowing what kids are expected to know when they get a certain place is so important. I don't think we think enough about it. And, at this workshop we went to, there's a lot of discussion about remedial classes. And what do you get in the remediated for? And do the people in that class that's the core level actually talk to the people who are preparing students for that class? And, you know, for me, the big question has been, okay, we have 098, which is algebra, 099, which is algebra, and then suddenly they're in statistics. And I don't know enough about math to know how do 8 hours of algebra actually prepare you for statistics? And is that exactly what you need to get that preparation?
And was there a discussion between the two?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And because that, you know, it used to be algebra, core algebra, but now it's algebra, statistics, and I don't know if that's lined up. I just advise those poor kids that get stuck in the jumble wheel of 098, 099 and never get out. So, you know, just that kind of thing. And I think even about English, the same thing. We have 090, and then we have 105. 105 and 106 are well coordinated, but I don't think 090 is coordinated at all with 105. I don't know that it isn't, but that's what kids who take both of them say. So, I mean, I wonder how much, even within our own curriculum, we really tried to say, you're getting ready to take this, but you're not ready, so here's what you need to do to get ready. Here's the goal we're shooting at, and here's what you need to do to get there.
So effect of learning community within the math division.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it really could be.
And within English and within anybody that has,
department,
you know, if you have those sequenced courses and they have to be sequenced, then what are you really building the foundation that you think you are to get to the top?
And a couple of years ago or so, I was like, I need to know what they're teaching in 098 and 099. I have no idea what my students are coming in.
Yeah.
In college algebra, the college algebra teacher, I don't know what they're coming in with, what kind of knowledge they have. And that's always, like I stress, we need to talk to the faculty who are teaching these classes. They're not, you know, just silos. They're not just.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. I think no matter what, if you're teaching a class Spanish 111 that's going to go to 112 to 211 to 212, if there's any kind of sequence, your piece of that is not your piece. It's part of the sequence. And so no matter how you feel about what should be taught in Spanish 111, you have to get them ready for what the person in 112 thinks 111 was all about. So, I mean, I'm just throwing out examples of things that are sequenced, but I don't think, even if it's in the same discipline, I don't think we have enough conversation about what are you learning in this class that prepares you for this class, that prepares you for this class.
And I think that's a really good point, because in education we call them PLCs, professional learning communities, and those are the discussions we're having among all of the science, you know, the folks, and I think that would be a perfect place to start, is between them.
Interestingly, we had the three of us a workshop for high school teachers in the summer, and Jason actually talked to them about the idea of our project. And you want to talk about how they realized that, or they were talking about their students, the students they're getting in high school are not prepared because somebody else previously have not done their job.
Yeah, the crossover just wasn't there. There was exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Dirksen. There was just no communication. So they were so unprepared when they got to the other classes in the high school. So, yeah.
No, you can brag on
Okay.
Sheila.
Sheila Daft. Sheila Daft.
Oh, you can brag.
Y-
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't understand what brag is.
Yeah, brag.
Okay.
Compliment her. Yeah.
Yeah, so Sheila Daft is our grant coordinator in the department. She has kept up with us.
Many emails.
Tolerated
Jason turned
us,
this in.
and we couldn't have done a lot of the things that we have done without her help. So
And when they say that they had to do several meetings to figure out about the grant, if you know the grant process, it's because it's been through several iterations before we get it funded.
Right.
So then they have to remember what they did 4 years ago. What did we say we were going to do with this? So it's been a pleasure, though, to see how it's taking shape.
Yeah.
It's neat.
Good questions? All right.
Thank
you guys
very
so much. Thank you.
Very interesting.